come in. Come in. Oh, hi. Come and have a seat. Well, we stagger into the new year together. I thought you were mentioning to me, in fact you've mentioned it several times, that you'd like me to read from the Silmarillion. So I thought, well, at the beginning of a new year, we could read Tolkien's own account of the beginning, you know, the great beginning, the cosmic beginning, and indeed the pre-cosmic beginning, which he gives in the Silmarillion. I remember when the Silmarillion first came out and I bought it in paperback, and at first there was a kind of shock in reading it because it's so different. It's not the sort of close telling, it is a little bit later on, but it starts sort of this great sort of musical vision of the creation of the cosmos. I think, you know, to make a biblical comparison, turning to the Silmarillion, certainly the opening of the Silmarillion, from all the kind of close, detailed, kind of granular narrative of the Lord of the Rings, is a bit like turning from, say the great Joseph narrative later in Genesis, when you've got, you know, all the sons of Jacob and Joseph, you know, the run to the litter and, you know, being nearly killed and sold into slavery, and then all the great denouements until the families reunited. If you happen to pick up Genesis there, and then you suddenly went back to Genesis 1, and, you know, let there be light, and there was light, and it would be so different you could scarcely sort of believe you're reading the same book. And certainly, I think the opening of and the great themes of the Silmarillion are more like Genesis 1. Anyway, this is the edition I've got, and it's a companion. You know, I've been reading to you from the 3 big volumes. I've taken the dust jackets off. This isn't the same series. It's kind of uniform with them. So it's you can see there it's HarperCollins, originally 1988. I have this particular edition with the illustrations by Ted Naismith, 1988 and 2004. Well, mine is 2004, obviously. So I've had this for 20 years or so. Back in 2004 I really had to save up to get it, but I was determined to have all the ones in this large, easy to read, beautifully illustrated series. So let's just hear this. There's a thing that happens in this which I think is parallel to an actual experience that we have. When you're listening to great music and you're kind of absorbed in the music, well, if you're, certainly this is the case with me, I don't know what it is with you, but although there are no words in the narrative of the music, it seems to mean so much that I have visions in my mind. I have great seas rolling by, or beautiful islands or shores. It seems to conjure up a series of images. And that's an idea that's taken up here. So anyway, let's just read the music of the Aenor. I never know how these talking words should be pronounced. I suppose we all have our own ways, and if we haven't got a friendly elf to consult, we don't really know. Ainulindala is how I would pronounce the title of this. So here it is. There was Iru, the One, who in Ardor is called Iluvata, and he made first the Aenor, the Holy Ones, these I think are the angels of his cosmos, that were the offspring of his thought, and they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music, and they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but few together, while the rest hearkened, for each comprehended only that part of the mind of Iluvata from which he came, and in the understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened, they came to a deeper understanding, and increased in unison. and harmony. There's a really fundamental idea there, which is that one of the sort of beauties of the creation of free, conscious, separately conscious beings, such as ourselves, is that each of these conscious beings has its own distinctive vision and apprehension of the cosmos, and through the cosmos of the mind of God. And therefore we need each other to know more, not only to know and love each other, but to know more of God. Everybody's view adds something to everybody else. There is a certain uniformity because they're looking at God, but there's a complete difference as well, which allows for the harmony. Anyway, it came to pass that Iluvatar called together all the Ainur and propounded to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than he had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendour of its end amazed the Ainur, so that they bowed before Iluvatar and were silent. Then Iluvatar said to them, "Of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that ye make in harmony together a great music. And since I have kindled you with the flame imperishable, ye shall show forth your powers in adorning this theme, each with his own thoughts and devices, if he will. But I will sit and hearken and be glad that through you great beauty has been awakened into song." There's the heart of Tolkien's whole understanding of creativity. That whereas God creates ex nihilo, we make with what we're given. We take what's given and we adorn it. Our creativity is essentially a response to his. So we've, in that sense, been kindled with the flame imperishable, and with creativity as well. I will sit and hearken and be glad that through you great beauty has been awakened into song. That's like God beholding and seeing that it is good. Then the voices of the Ainur, like unto harps and lutes and pipes and trumpets and viols and organs, and like unto countless choirs singing with words, began to fashion the theme of Iluvatar to a great music, and a sound arose of endless interchanging melodies woven in harmony that passed beyond hearing into the depths and into the heights, and the places of the dwelling of Iluvatar were filled to overflowing, and the music and the echo of the music went out into the void, and it was not void. Never since have the Ainur made any music like to this music, though it has been said that a greater still shall be made before Iluvatar by the choirs of the Ainur and the children of Iluvatar after the end of days. Then the themes of Iluvatar shall be played aright, and take being in the moment of their utterance, for all shall then understand fully his intent in their part, and each shall know the comprehension of each, and Iluvatar shall give to their thoughts the secret fire, being well pleased. It's glorious. So you have a glimpse both of creation and of the new creation. But now Iluvatar sat and hearkened, and for a great while it seemed good to him, for in the music there were no flaws. But as the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Iluvatar, for he sought therein to increase the power and glory of the part assigned to himself. To Melkor among the Ainur had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He had gone often alone into the void places, seeking the imperishable flame, for desire grew hot within him to bring into being things of his own, and it seemed to him that Iluvatar took no thought for the void, and he was impatient of its emptiness. Yet he found not the fire, for it is with Iluvatar, and being alone he had begun to conceive thoughts of his own, unlike those of his brethren. So we get the first hints of, as it were, the fall of Lucifer, and it's still a good thing perverted. The creativity is a gift of God, but he wants to do something not in consonance with the theme. Some of these thoughts he now wove into his music, and straightway discord arose about him, and many that sang nigh with him grew despondent, and their thoughts were disturbed and their music faltered. But some began to attune their music to his rather than to the thought which they had had at first. Then the discord of Melkor spread ever wider, and the melodies which had been heard before foundered in a sea of turbulent sound. But Iluvatar sat and hearkened until it seemed that about his throne there was a raging storm, as of dark waters that made war upon one another, in an endless wrath that could not be assuaged. Then Iluvatar rose, and the Ainur perceived that he smiled, and he lifted up his left hand, and a new theme began amid the storm, like and yet unlike to the former theme, and it gathered power, and it had new beauty. But the discord of Melkor rose in uproar and contended with it, and again there was a war of sound more violent than before. And there was war in heaven. A war of sound more violent than before. And it until many of the Ainur were dismayed and sang no longer, and Melkor had the mastery. Then again Iluvatar rose, and the Ainur perceived that his countenance was stern, and he lifted up his right hand, and behold, a third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others, for it seemed at first soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds and delicate melodies. But it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power and profundity, and it seemed at last that there were two musics progressing at one time before the seat of Iluvatar, and they were utterly at variance. The one was deep and wide and beautiful, but slow, and blended with an immeasurable sorrow, from which its beauty chiefly came. The other had now achieved a unity of its own, but it was loud and vain and endlessly repeated, and it had little harmony, but rather a clamorous unison, as of many trumpets braying upon a few notes, and it essayed to drown the other music by the violence of its voice. But it seemed that its most triumphant notes were taken by the other and woven into its own solemn pattern. So I wonder if this sort of clamping and, rhythm and all the same unity was him reflecting on things like the Nuremberg rallies. In the midst of this strife, whereat the halls of Iluvatar shook, and a tremor ran out into the silence as yet unmoved, Iluvatar rose a third time, and his face was terrible to behold. Then he raised up both his hands, and in one chord, deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, piercing as the light of the eye of Iluvatar, the music ceased. Amazing. Then Iluvatar spoke and said, "Mighty are the Ainur, and mightiest among them is Melkor. But that he may know that all the Ainur, that I am Iluvatar, those things which ye have sung, I will now show them forth, that ye may see what ye have done. And thou, Melkor, shalt see that no theme may be played that hath not its uttermost source in me, nor can any alter the music in my despite. For he that attempteth this shall prove but mine instrument in the devising of things more wonderful than he himself had imagined." This is introducing, one of the great themes, both of the narrative of the Lord of the Rings, but also of the great salvation story, which is summed up by the Church Fathers in the idea of the felix culpa, the happy fault, the necessarium peccatum. We have it in the beautiful old carol, which I'd hoped to hear this last Christmastide, but didn't. You remember the one that goes, "Adam lay bounden in a bond, 4,000 winter, thought he not too long, and all was for an apple that was took, as clerkes finden written in her book. Nay, had the apple taken been, that never had Mary, Mother of God, been of heaven queen. So blessed be the day the apple taken was, wherefore we maun singen Deo gratias." It's almost a shocking, but it's the shockingness of grace. It's like Paul saying, shall we sin that wherever sin is grace abounds? Shall we sin more that grace may more abound? Heaven forbid. But even to the worst, God has a response which takes the hidden best in the worst and resets it in a new melody, which is what redemption means. And so then the Ainur were afraid, and they did not comprehend the words that were said to them. And Melkor was filled with shame, of which came secret anger. But Iluvatar arose in splendour, and he went forth from the fair regions that he had made for the Ainur, and the Ainur followed him. But when they were come unto the void, Iluvatar said to them, "Behold your music." And he showed to them a vision, giving them sight where before was only hearing. And they saw a new world made visible before them, and it was globed amidst the void, and it was sustained therein, but was not of it. And as they looked and wondered, this world began to unfold its history, and it seemed to them that it lived and grew. And when the Ainur had gazed for a while and was silent, Iluvatar said again, "Behold your music. This is your minstrelsy, and each of you shall find contained therein, amid the design that I set before you, all those things which it may seem that he himself devised or added. And thou, Melkor, wilt discover all the secret thoughts of thy mind, and wilt perceive that they are but a part of the whole, and tributary to his glory." And as you know, he goes on to show how the Ainur could come into the world itself, and they who had sung it first could then, in space and time and activity and material, help their music to take shape in the created order. And of course, the first theme, is this creation. The second theme is the creation of the Ainur, but the third theme, which they had never heard before, which was so piercing and poignant, is the creation of what Tolkien calls the children of Iluvatar, and these are elves and men and the free folk, whose story we will see worked out later in the Silmarillion and in the Lord of the Rings. I love that idea that somehow we are, and everything else is, embodied music. And of course that idea didn't begin with Tolkien. I mean, it really begins with Pythagoras, who noticed that the proportions of things in the world are the same as the proportion of the notes in the octave and the harmony, and that then, of course, we still know this to some degree. I really like the fact that, I'm not by any means an expert on modern physics, but I remember when I was in Cambridge in their sort of science week going along to a lecture on string theory, which I have to say I didn't understand most of. But I do remember the bit where the chap said, what string theory means is that there are inconceivably tiny strings vibrating in 11 dimensions, and that the physical cosmos as we know it and perceive it are like the harmonics on the strings. I just thought, that'll do me. I would have loved to have had Tolkien sitting in the back of that same lecture room. Anyway, that's just a little taste of the extraordinary beginning of this extraordinary book. It goes on to have this wonderful bit where one of the most beautiful things that they see, and something that the Ainur and later the elves particularly love, is water. There's a great hymn to water, but there's a magnificent painting by Ted Naismith of, as it were, these primordial seas. I mean, the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the deep. So it's very beautiful. Some people think that the only way to handle scripture is simply to repeat it dully to everybody. But actually to make a beautiful, imaginative, a reimagining of it in another mode, in this case in the mode of music, is, I think, itself a response to a theme. And the idea that our lives is, as it were, we're given a theme and the theme is already there, but actually we can then play endless variations and harmonics and make counterpoints and fugues, and that's part of the glory of our own individual creativity. It's a wonderful thought. Anyway, I wish you joy and glory in music and your own creativity too, however and in whatever way that works out for you in your particular and unique part in creation. All the best for the new year.